Hello, I'm Pastor Lucy Hardy, and I bring you greetings from Bethany and East Lemonwire Lutheran churches in New Lisbon and rural Elroy. And tonight, I'm going to talk about an emotion that we don't often like, but we know that it's necessary and exudes from the disciples at the high point of our gospel reading tonight: fear. Fear, like I said, is an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous or likely to cause pain, is a threat. To fear means to be afraid of someone or something as they are likely to be dangerous, painful, or threatening. Threats that cause fear can be physical, emotional, psychological, real, or imagined. It is an unpleasant emotion, but it is also vital. If we weren't able to feel fear, humans from our ancient ancestors to us right now wouldn't be able to protect ourselves from legitimate threats. It was a vital response for our ancient ancestors who faced life or death situations daily. Life or death situations, though, still exist today, but they are experienced significantly less often. Most often, what causes us as humans to fear are things like public speaking, small spaces, heights, or certain creatures like spiders or snakes. We experience bouts of fear before big events, flights, first dates, or a movie. Although the stakes are lower when it comes to life-threatening fear, fear is still something that is extremely motivating. It keeps us safe, helps us avoid unsafe situations. It heightens our senses and makes us super aware of our surroundings. It gets our adrenaline pumping so much that some people even chase fear, right? There is a large portion of the movie industry that works hard at writing and producing films that will instill fear into moviegoers, and people go to them willingly. There is also a whole world of sports and tourism that is based on playing off of fear as people seek thrills such as bungee jumping, extreme sports, paranormal experiences, or even extreme survival challenges. There are many self-help or wellness books or articles written every year about fears and phobias and how to overcome them. In fact, one of Jesus's most common phrases across the Gospels is, "Do not be afraid," or "fear not." The command, "do not fear," is littered throughout the Psalms and the stories of faith found in our Hebrew scriptures. It would seem that, although vital, fear is an emotion that is to be conquered and not felt. It can seem like fear is something that God does not want us to have, or one can't be fearful and faithful at the same time. Or with how often "do not be afraid" is mentioned in our scriptures, it can seem like God would abandon those who are afraid. So we should prove that we do not fear. At the first reading or hearing of our gospel passage tonight, it may be easy to think that fear being a clear sign of a lack of faith is true. It may be easy to assume that God has no patience for fear and desires us to prove our faith. Like when Peter exercises his bold or fearless faith in Jesus, he's able to do what is impossible: walk on water. But as soon as he gives into fear, he can no longer do the impossible and grasps for help and safety. And I think there is some truth to that interpretation, because fear does stop us from doing things and can stop us from trusting in God. But I also think this lesson of Peter walking on water can tell us more. And the more lies in Peter's actions, but also Jesus's full response to Peter. When the disciples see Jesus walking on water, they are terrified. They cannot believe their eyes. They can't believe what they are seeing, that they are seeing Jesus. So they think they are seeing a ghost or a demon, because what else could be walking on a storm-swept sea in the early hours of the morning? If that's not a moment to feel fear, what is? But immediately, Jesus yells words of comfort and reassurance, not blame. He tells them exactly who he is, expecting their fear almost. Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, for I am who I am. It is I. Again, don't be afraid. And then Peter, perhaps eager to show Jesus his faith, to prove himself to be a good disciple, proposes a test of sorts and demands that Jesus issue a command to walk toward him. When Jesus passes the test with flying colors and bids Peter to come to him, and Peter does step out of the boat, and then he realizes in whose presence he is in and whom he tested, he sinks. And again, Jesus walks closer, reaches out his hand, rescues Peter as he is drowning. Jesus then helps Peter think about what happened, processes a new revelation about God's power and who God is. Jesus helps Peter process a response. He helps him process how he feels and what he did when the divine came to him in a guise he didn't recognize. Jesus does not chastise his disciples for being afraid. They have every right to be afraid. They are afraid because they feel the waves bashing into their boat and aren't too happy about the huge potential of drowning. They are afraid because they have been battling large waves all night and can't see what is ahead of them. They are afraid because they lack the tools for which to process what they are seeing. God is acting in new ways all the time as they are going about following Jesus. And human beings, especially now in this moment, don't have the ability to walk on water. God does not chastise us, me, you, for being afraid. God knows we live in a world where fear is necessary to keep us safe on so many different levels. We have our own waves that bash into us, threatening to drown us, that prevent us from being able to see what's right in front of us. They prevent us from seeing God working in the world and in our lives, walking toward us with a hand outstretched. The issue is not fear, for Jesus knows that the disciples feared, and Jesus knows that we will feel and have fear. The issue is where fear leads us. Peter's fear led him straight into suspicion and distrust. Lord, if it is you, fear can lead us into a never-ending cycle of testing God and testing our and one another's faith, thinking we have to prove to God that we believe in what God does in order to receive God's love and forgiveness. There is no lesson in the Gospels, lesson in the Bible, in the whole story of God that call us to prove our faith to test God. In fact, stories of those who test God don't often end well for the testers. Jesus does not teach his disciples that they have to prove something to earn God's protective care. In fact, Jesus teaches the opposite. The heavenly parent, that parent that is both father and mother, along with the son, love you already. Peter's test fails. Despite his boldness, he is not able to prove who Jesus is by walking on water. Peter sinks within seconds. Why does his test fail? Because it's not up to us to prove who God is. God proves who God is. And yes, sometimes God proves who God is and what God does in a very vivid, powerful, and miraculous way. And other times it's quieter, calling us to trust that God's Spirit abides with us, even in our most wild and chaotic times of our lives. We, like Peter, will not always be able to see or recognize who Jesus is or what Jesus is doing. We may fear where Jesus is leading us. We may even feel the need to prove our faith or test to see if Jesus is really with us here. We may fear that Jesus has abandoned us or is trying to trick us. But then we can remember Peter and the disciples in the boat as Jesus walked on water toward them. We can remember Jesus dying on the cross so that all of God's children, all of creation can be in right relationship with God and feel God's all-encompassing love. There is nothing we can do that proves to God how much faith we have. Instead, God proves God's love to us, for us, and promises to be with us when the perils seem too much. God is always moving toward us and climbs into our boat, climbs into our lives, and reminds us, take courage. Remember, I am with you. It is I. Do not be afraid. Amen.